The Twisted Case of Daniel Morcombe. The tragic story of 13-year-old Daniel Morcombe. An unfortunate end through a series of unpredictable events that a ruthless child predator took advantage of. It is one of the most largely investigated missing cases in all of Australia and Queensland's history. The investigation went on for 8 years, marred with costly errors and unprofessionalism. The truth almost remained hidden forever. Life of Daniel Morcombe.
We have reason to believe that he's a maniac.
I don't accept the whole situation.
Sentenced Theodore Bundy to die in the electric chair
brother and sister.
as the mechanics of the
Daniel lived near the Sunset Coast, Queensland, Australia, with his parents Denise and Bruce, as well as Dean, his older brother, and Bradley, his twin. The Morcombes were the usual loving Australian family who spent a whole lot of time together. This made them tightly knit, especially Daniel and his twin brother Bradley. Daniel Morcombe was smart, intelligent, and mature for his age, so it was no surprise that he was loved by everyone around him. He was well-mannered, a good timekeeper, generous, and genuinely cared for those around him. Daniel was very helpful and would often give hands to his neighbors when they were harvesting fruits. He loved animals so much that he wanted to be a veterinarian when he grew up. Unfortunately, life had other plans. On Sunday, December 7th, 2003, what seemed like a usual day to the Morcombes turned out to be a tragic one. Denise and Bruce had gone out for a work function, leaving Bradley, Dean, and Daniel at home alone. In the early morning, Daniel and Bradley helped their neighbors pick fruits as they usually did. This was around Christmas time, and Daniel decided to take this opportunity to get Christmas presents for his family, as well as get a haircut. He asked his twin brother Bradley if they could go together to Sunshine Plaza, a nearby shopping mall, but his brother refused. He would then walk half a mile to the bus stop, where he wanted to catch a ride on a bus to the shopping plaza. That was not a big deal because he had often gone to the mall alone by bus a lot of times. Daniel, wearing a red shirt and shorts, stopped at the bus stop waiting for the bus to the shopping mall. The bus stop at Keels Mountain Overpass was an unofficial bus stop, but buses would often stop there to pick people up, making it like every other bus stop. Daniel had arrived at the bus stop waiting for the 1:35 p.m. bus. He waited for 15 to 20 minutes, but the bus did not arrive. Unknown to Daniel, just a few miles back, the bus he patiently waited for had broken down at the side of the road. A backup bus was sent to pick up the stranded passengers, but an instruction had been made for it to head non-stop to the mall. This was because they had already wasted the time of the stranded passengers and wanted to get them to their destination on time. The bus driver, knowing more people would be waiting to be picked up at other bus stops, had sent for an extra bus to pick them up. Upon seeing Daniel waiting by the bus stop, the backup bus drove past, thinking the extra bus would pick him up. The bus had driven by the bus stop at 2:15 p.m., and by 2:18 p.m., when the extra bus drove past, Daniel was no longer at the bus stop. What exactly happened between those 3 minutes? Denise and Bruce had returned home by 4:30 p.m., meeting only Bradley at home. They asked about Dean and Daniel's whereabouts, and they immediately asked where they had wandered off to. Dean had gone to visit his friend, not too far off, and would return home not long after. Upon hearing Daniel did not return from his trip to the mall, his parents knew something was wrong. They called the bus company about their son and were informed about the broken down bus. Their immediate thought was that he was stranded on the road somewhere. So they went out to find him. On their way, they saw the broken down bus being towed away, but they saw no sign of Daniel. By 7:30, more than 2 hours into the search, they called the police to report their son missing, but they were told to wait until the next day. At this junction, they had called everyone they knew, asking if their son was with them, but no one had seen him. On the 8th of December, a missing persons report was finally filed. The media was informed, and a very large-scale manhunt began. 50 state emergency service volunteers were brought on board to search for Daniel through the forest, waterways, as well as the ground. Helicopters and dogs were used to search for him, but he still wasn't found. The only lead they had was sort of a man waiting along with him at the bus stop. Daniel's family held a vigil for Daniel, along with 400 more people who came to support the family. At the vigil, once more, they appealed for any form of help in finding Daniel. 2 weeks later, on the 19th of December, a day that was supposed to be Daniel's birthday, a reenactment of the day he disappeared was done with a teenage mannequin placed at the bus stop. In the later years, a life-size model of the man leaning on the wall behind him was also placed. These would alert passers-by of his disappearance and encourage witnesses to come forward. This method yielded results because a lot of calls came in from passengers of the bus, and people who drove past reported that they had indeed seen a man leaning against the wall with one leg up at the bus stop. He was described as good-looking, with a tattoo on his shoulder and a goatee. Like most teenagers would, he had been squatting and doodling in the soil with a stick. A few more people had reported seeing a blue sedan driving by with someone violently punching the chairs, and some saw a white 4x4 car parked around the area. Local media carried the news about the man, hoping they would identify him, but he would not come forward, so he was officially made the suspect. At this point, all of the sex offenders in the area were brought forward. There were 39 sex offenders in total, but they all provided alibis for the day the event took place. An extensive investigation was put forward, but none of them seemed suspicious. 500 other persons of interest were interviewed, but none of them turned up with any answer. Years would pass by, with Daniel's parents holding more and more events, hoping to find the culprit. The Daniel Morcombe Foundation was founded in 2005. Although it was started to raise efforts in trying to find the culprit, the foundation soon developed into one involved with ensuring the safety of children through lectures and providing voluntary services. In December 2008, $1 million Australian dollars were put up as a reward for anyone who could come up with the lead on Daniel's case. $250,000 were from the government and $750,000 were from private organizations. The reward was never claimed. On the 31st of May, 2009, 6 years later, no reports came in, and the private donation expired, but $250,000 for the government were still up. The same day that the money expired, a potential suspect was brought up. Douglas Jackway drove a blue sedan, most of the reports said, and he was also known to drag young boys off the streets. He also matched the description of the suspect. He had tattoos and a goatee, and he lived an hour and a half from where Daniel went missing. At the time of the crime, he was released from prison with a high chance of reoffending. This lead was followed, but led nowhere. Inquest. In 2010, the Morcombes asked the coroner for an inquest to be made. The inquest would take place from October 2010 to April 2011. Every pedophile who lived nearby or every person of interest in the case would be looked into and interviewed with questions from that day with the hope of finding the truth. They brought in pedophiles with extensive histories who seemed capable of committing the manner of the crime. They were all named with numbers, P1, P2, etc., to help identify them. One of the pedophiles had confessed to putting Daniel's body into a barrel and dumping it into Brisbane River, with the help of an acquaintance. The river was searched extensively for his body, and it was discovered that the pedophile just confessed to a crime he didn't commit to amuse himself. A person of interest in the case was P7, Brett Peter Cohen, who was 41 years old, 35 at the time of the attack, and a father of 3. Immediately, he walked into the courtroom. Denise remembered getting chills and immediately whispering to her husband that he was the culprit. He had matched the description of the offender. He had a tattoo on his shoulder, he had a goatee at the time, and he was good looking. Cohen had admitted to seeing the broken down bus and that he lived not too far from where Daniel went missing. During the inquest, he was asked if he had committed the crime. He looked into the eyes of Daniel's parents, saying he did not. He responded saying he couldn't have been the culprit because he only went for children from ages 6 to 10, and Daniel was too old for him. Brett Peter Cohen, the man who was put on the stand, had no social life, no interests. He was a loner, and he was generally regarded as the black sheep of his family. Cohen, at an early age, was involved in drugs, theft, vicious attacks, rape, and sexual assaults on minors. He had started targeting victims when he was a child, targeting children at swimming pools so he would escape easily. His first sentence was in 1987. 7-year-old Tim, who was schooled in the daycare Cohen worked at, along with some other kids, was helping him with some work. Cohen had a few unsuccessful attempts at grooming and luring Tim into the bathroom, but one day he managed to do it and forced him into the cubicle, where he assaulted the boy and strangled him. This vicious attack would only stop when a daycare worker called out Tim's name. He had threatened to kill young Tim if he told anyone about the incident. Cohen was later arrested and charged for his crime. When young Tim testified against Cohen in court, Cohen kept smiling, almost like he was enjoying every moment of what was going on. Despite his vicious act, he was sentenced to 2 years and served less than 1 year. Cohen would then move to Darwin, masking as a Reformed Christian. He lived with his girlfriend Tracy in a trailer park. In 1993, in the trailer park, he would strike again. While there was a get-together, a 6-year-old boy, a child of Cohen's neighbor, went missing. Cohen had lured his victim into the caravan by 7 p.m., molesting and strangling him. He left him for dead in the trunk of a burnt-out car with rocks and bricks. The boy had managed to gain consciousness and had wandered into a petrol station. He looked so beat up that they had assumed he was hit by a car. His ribs were broken, his lungs punctured, and his eyes were hemorrhaging from suffocation. Cohen had told no one about his history of abuse. He had been the most vocal and helpful while searching for the young boy. He would only confess when the police were zeroing in on the caravan, asking for DNA samples from everyone. He got scared and would immediately confess, leaving everyone shocked. Cohen was sentenced to 7 years in prison and would only serve 3.5. A psychological evaluation was carried out on him, and it was concluded that he was a narcissist, a pathological liar with mild psychopathy, a severe lack of empathy, and sociopathic. He had lied in court about feeling remorse because during the evaluation, without remorse, he would say his victims would not report him because they probably enjoyed it. Brett Cohen would move to Sunshine Coast to live with his aunt and uncle, who were devout Christians. He once again masked himself as a devout Christian as well. He became a leading member of the church and would soon after meet a woman, marry her, and have 3 children with her. His aunt and uncle and wife knew only pieces of his past because he hid it well. His wife would later divorce him 5 years after Daniel's incident, taking custody of the children. The exact reason was unknown, but they were still together when Daniel went missing. Timeline of Cohen's interviews. Cohen was interviewed first on the 21st of December 2003 because he owned a white 4x4 like the one spotted beside the scene of the incident, and he also matched the physical description. Cohen had a solid alibi. He had spent the morning working in the garden and had gone in the afternoon to pick up a mulch from his acquaintance. He returned home around 2:30, and the route he took led him past the bus stop because he remembered seeing the broken down bus. The police had asked to do a forensic sweep of his vehicle, but nothing was found. They proceeded to contact the said acquaintance, but the acquaintance said he was there for only a few minutes. This left a 45-minute gap in his alibi, but there was insufficient evidence to arrest him on it. In July 2005, he was interviewed once more. This was when he admitted to seeing the broken down bus. When asked if he had abducted Daniel, he replied saying, "Probably not." September 14th, 2006, he was interviewed concerning his strained alibi. He claimed he went to meet his drug supplier, saying he didn't talk about it earlier because he did not want to implicate his drug supplier. He was then brought in to be interviewed. He could not remember the exact day because years had already passed. During the inquest, his alibi would unravel. The dealer went to the casino most Sundays with her boyfriend, and she had gone on the day of the incident as well. She only recalled because she found out through her loyalty card in the casino machine, which she used to track back to the time she was in the casino, from 1:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. This meant he was lying about his alibi. Despite this fact, during the inquest, he said nothing would implicate him. Investigation. On his flight back to Perth, where he had moved to, he met Joe Emery, who was a career criminal. He discovered they had a lot in common, so they hit things off. After returning to Perth, he was freaked out by the inquest and proceeded to change his name to Shadow Nunya Hunter. His life would go downhill from this point because he lost his job and was desperate for money. In desperation, he contacted Joe, and together they joined a criminal gang. He was introduced to Perry Fitzgerald. He began with small jobs to earn loyalty and soon climbed up to other jobs. He would push drugs, engage in pimping, debt collecting, selling and buying weapons, exchanging guns, stealing cars, threatening people, and bribing people. Every day, the mantra of loyalty and respect would be drummed into him. If they did well, they would be referred to the main boss, which was like a dream come true. He began living lavishly. He was earning big money, living with big cars and nice clothes. He would do anything to keep things that way. On the 4th of August 2011, Perry Fitzgerald picked up Cohen for a meeting with Craig, a corrupt case officer working with the crime gang. Craig informed him about a 100% subpoena out for his arrest. They both asked if it was anything serious that would destroy their crime gang. They asked him if there was anything he was keeping from them. They asked him to trust them, as their gang was based on loyalty. Cohen did not let his guard down, but he was worried about getting caught and having to let go of his lavish lifestyle. A massive drug job involving $1 million had come in, and on their way to the drug job, a call came in from Arnold, the main boss, whom Cohen was very excited to finally meet. His car was turned around and driven to the presidential suite of the Hyatt Hotel. Operation Vista. Unknown to Cohen, he was in a fake crime gang. It was truly an undercover operator known as Operation Vista, set up to apprehend him. He would work in crime rings until he reached the top and met the main boss, who was an undercover expert interrogator, who would get him to confess to his crimes. They drummed loyalty and respect into him daily to get him to trust them and be excited enough to meet the main boss to open up and confess. The investigation style is controversial and is only used when law enforcement agencies have no other option to try. It was developed in Canada, and is illegal in the United States. Due to its controversial nature, it requires a lot of permission to use. Brett Cohen was closely monitored. 35 undercover cops were put on the operation to make it successful, and this was their all-in attempt to get him. The presidential room of the Hyatt Hotel, where the interrogation would take place, was rigged with cameras all over. About $100,000 was spent to set up the hotel room. Arnold had spoken to Cohen about usual things at first, to help get his guard down. He then cornered him with the investigation into him about Daniel Morcombe. Arnold told him he didn't care what he had done. He just wanted to know to get rid of the evidence, not to destroy the gang. He told him that they didn't want anything to happen to him and that they had people in high places that could get his subpoenas dismissed if he came clean. Cohen denied any responsibility for the case. Cohen liked being part of a group and his lavish lifestyle, so when Arnold threatened to drop him if anything happened, he finally cracked and confessed to his crimes. The best way to secure his confession as admissible would be to get him to lead them to where he had dumped the body, and they did just that. What happened? Cohen was driving back from picking up the mulch from his acquaintance when he saw the broken-down bus. After he saw Daniel waiting alone at the bus station, realizing the bus had broken down, he took advantage of it. He then parked his 4x4 car at a nearby church and pretended like he was waiting for the bus as well. When the first bus passed by, realizing another would soon follow, he took the opportunity to lure Daniel into his car. Saying he would drive him to Sunshine Plaza, he drove him 30 minutes through a farm to an abandoned house. Daniel started to panic, and Cohen claimed that out of fear, he put his hands around Daniel's neck and strangled him to death. It can't be said for sure if he was molested or not, but Daniel was killed about an hour after being abducted. He put Daniel's body in his boot and drove 150 meters into a secluded bush. The body was stripped and dumped in shallow water and covered with mud and leaves. He went back a week later to bury the body, but due to the body being exposed to water and sun, it had decomposed quickly and was gone. He used a shovel to break down the bones into fragments and buried them. After the confession, Cohen led them to the body. On Cohen's way back to his car, he was arrested. When he was arrested, he seemed surprised for a moment, but soon resumed being nonchalant and quiet. He smiled like he did during his first trial. Cohen was charged with murder, kidnapping, deprivation of liberty, indecent treatment of a minor, and mistreatment of a corpse. He was always the main suspect, but this time they would charge him, as they now had evidence. The woodlands were searched for what was left of his body for 4 days. On the 4th day, one of his shoes was found, and then another was found. 17 bone fragments were found, and the DNA all belonged to the same person. In the same creek, Daniel's clothes were also found, including his underwear, belt, and shorts. It took a week to identify his body, a week of anxious feelings for the Morcombes, who had heard of a body being found. His body, after being identified, was returned to his family. Trial. He pleaded guilty to the crimes, claiming Douglas Jackway was the culprit. His name was not released to the public at first, but Daniel's parents fought against it, and his name was eventually released to the press. There were 116 witnesses and 200 exhibits during the trial. The defense argued that his confession was not admissible in court and that he had not hurt the boy, but only disposed of the body. Despite the defense's argument, after 8 hours, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. On the 13th of March 2014, 11 years after Daniel went missing, Cohen was sentenced to life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole for 20 years. During the trial, he showed no remorse. He smiled like when he was arrested during his first court case. He seemed emotionless. The Morcombes were absent from the trial, choosing to enjoy a normal family lunch. Cohen tried to appeal his sentence, but the High Court rejected it. In prison, he was attacked. Severely boiling water was thrown at him, burning his face, his chest, as well as his legs. He was also stabbed in prison after openly boasting about his attack as well. The case of Daniel Morcombe shows how extensively the police were willing to investigate to solve a crime. Daniel was buried on December 7th, 2012, 9 years after he was missing. His funeral was held at his old school. A lot of people showed up to show support for his family. Daniel's spirit lives on through the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, where he helps other people. They hold huge charity events in Australia, teaching children about child safety and holding seminars as well as workshops. They also support victims of crime with money as well as evidence. In memory of Daniel, who walked 4 kilometers wearing a red top on the day he went missing, members of the foundation would all wear a red shirt and walk 4 kilometers.
Probably just being a normal family. He always used to bring me flowers and buy little knickknacks, but he's always going to be that 13-year-old, isn't he? Everyone knows that face.
Is there something in particular you miss about your son?
You know, to watch him grow up and become the man he should have been.